6.2 billion pounds, 2 aircraft carriers, the largest warships ever built for the Royal Navy. The HMS Queen Elizabeth and HMS Prince of Wales were meant to restore British power projection for the next 40 years. In February 2024, NATO launched the largest military exercise since the Cold War, Exercise Steadfast Defender, across the North Atlantic. Britain's flagship was supposed to lead it. Routine checks the day before sailing uncovered a fault on the starboard propeller shaft. The ship never left Portsmouth Harbor, and that was not the first time. That was not even the worst time. This is the story of the 6 billion pound warships Britain cannot reliably get out to sea. Portsmouth Naval Base, December 2017. The direct naval descendant of Queen Elizabeth I was commissioned into service, steel gray and enormous against the Hampshire skyline. 284 meters long, 65,000 tons of displacement, a flight deck wider than 3 Olympic pools. Her sister ship, HMS Prince of Wales, followed 2 years later. Together, they replaced a gap the Royal Navy had lived with since the retirement of the Invincible class in 2014. For nearly 2 decades, Britain had been a carrier nation without carriers. The original budget, announced in 2007, was £3.9 billion for both ships. By 2013, the contract had climbed to £6.2 billion. Add the F-35B Lightning II jets they were designed to carry, each one priced above £90 million, and the program's real footprint crossed £18 billion of public money. These were the most expensive ships the Royal Navy had ever commissioned. They were also, on paper, the centerpiece of Britain's return to blue water sea power, designed to serve until the 2060s alongside the navies of the United States, France, and Japan. The first cracks in the hull of HMS Queen Elizabeth showed up almost immediately. In 2017, before she had even completed her sea trials, a leak flooded part of the ship in Portsmouth. The Ministry of Defense called it a teething issue. After she commissioned in 2019, HMS Prince of Wales flooded twice in her first year of service, once so badly that a burst water main in the engine room damaged electrical switchboards and shut the vessel down for months of repairs. Still, the official line held. New class of warship, complex systems, nothing abnormal. Then came August 2022. Prince of Wales left Portsmouth on a high-profile diplomatic voyage to the United States, heading across the Atlantic to carry out exercises with the U.S. Navy, the Royal Canadian Navy, and the U.S. Marine Corps. One day out of port, off the Isle of Wight, the starboard propeller shaft gave up. The 33-ton propeller, roughly the weight of 30 Ford Fiestas, came loose from its coupling. The ship limped to a halt in the Solent and had to be towed back to harbor. When divers and engineers finally got underneath the hull, they found something that should have been impossible. The propeller shaft had been misaligned during the original build years earlier in Rosyth. Nobody had caught it. The ship had been commissioned, handed over to the Royal Navy, and deployed with a known structural defect sitting underwater at 33 tons, waiting to break. Prince of Wales was towed north to Babcock's Rosyth shipyard, the same dry dock where she had been constructed. Repairs took 9 months. The flagship role was quietly transferred to her sister. 9 months. To understand what that means for a warship program, consider what else happened in those 9 months. The 2022 deployment to the United States was scrapped. A planned relief rotation, where one carrier would take over from the other on station, collapsed because there was now only one functioning ship. The Royal Navy publicly insisted that both carriers were fully available. Privately, dockyard staff were installing new shaft sections and asking what else had been missed during construction. And somehow, it gets worse. On February 3, 2024, HMS Queen Elizabeth was being prepped for departure to lead NATO's Exercise Steadfast Defender, the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. 90,000 troops from 31 member states, an 8-ship British carrier strike group, air support from F-35B Dambuster Squadron at RAF Marham, Spanish, Danish, and American vessels falling in alongside. It was the defining NATO deterrent demonstration of the 2020s. Commodore James Blackmore was ready to sail. Routine pre-sailing checks flagged an issue with a coupling on Queen Elizabeth's starboard propeller shaft. Same ship class, same side. Same component as the Prince of Wales failure 18 months earlier. The sailing was cancelled within hours. Prince of Wales, herself still fresh from her 9-month repair, was hurriedly prepared with temporary fixes to take her sister's place. A planned overhaul of Prince of Wales was postponed. Britain's flagship did not lead NATO's largest Cold War-era exercise. Britain's flagship never left port. The Ministry of Defense's official position was that the two failures were unrelated. Different components, different root causes, not a class issue with the design. Former First Sea Lord Lord Alan West did not buy it. In Parliament on February 12, 2024, he asked the question Whitehall had been dodging for 18 months. How were British taxpayers paying to fix a ship that had been accepted from the builders with a known misalignment, and why weren't the builders refunding anything? The propeller shafts on the Queen Elizabeth class are too long to be forged as single pieces. Each shaft runs roughly 1/3 of the ship's length, 90-odd meters of rotating steel, assembled in 3 sections bolted together by couplings. Those couplings bind the shaft sections into a single drive line. They are the single point of failure for half of the ship's propulsion. When one fails, the carrier runs on one shaft or not at all. Independent naval engineers pointed out something uncomfortable. Both failures were at the same coupling position on the same starboard side. The Prince of Wales failure traced back to a build stage alignment error. The Queen Elizabeth failure was described by the Ministry of Defense as wear and tear. Naval Lookout, one of the most respected open-source Royal Navy analysis outlets, flagged the uncomfortable overlap. Rolls-Royce had supplied the Michel line shaft bearings. Babcock and the Aircraft Carrier Alliance had delivered the hulls. Nobody was taking responsibility. Nobody was returning money. If you're finding this useful, hit subscribe. This channel breaks down how nation-state spending translates into actual capability, or the lack of it, every week. By 2025, the carrier problem had a second dimension underneath it. The F-35B Lightning II jets these ships were built to carry were at the center of that problem. Each F-35B costs over £90 million. Britain had committed to buying 138 of them. A National Audit Office report in 2025 delivered a verdict Whitehall had been bracing for. Only 1/3 of the United Kingdom's F-35B jets could perform all of their intended missions. Only half were mission capable on any given day, well below the Ministry of Defense's own target. The National Audit Office called it a disappointing return on the £11 billion the United Kingdom had already spent on the jet program. The reasons were structural. There was a shortage of trained engineers, spare parts were stuck in an international supply chain, and the integration of long-range standoff weapons was delayed, the very weapons that would let the F-35B use its stealth to strike from a safer distance. When Prince of Wales deployed on her first full operational carrier tour, the Royal Navy had to fill out the deck with United States Marine Corps F-35B jets because Britain simply did not have enough of her own to fly. So the pattern was grim. A ship that could not reliably leave port, carrying jets that could not reliably fly, escorted by a destroyer and frigate fleet. The Royal Navy itself admitted was stretched too thin to properly defend a carrier group, and a repair bill that, per a Freedom of Information request, had already crossed nearly £1 billion on maintaining and fixing faults on 2 warships less than a decade old. That is the kind of number that makes accountants cry. Here's where the story gets more complicated. In April 2025, Prince of Wales left Portsmouth for Operation Highmast, an 8-month deployment to the Indo-Pacific. She transited the Mediterranean, passed through the Suez Canal, navigated the dangerous Bab el-Mandeb under Houthi missile threat, and sailed 40,000 nautical miles through the Indian Ocean, the Sea of Japan, and the South China Sea. For the first time, she carried a full complement of 24 British F-35Bs on deck. She conducted the Talisman Sabre exercise in Australia alongside the U.S. Navy and the USS George Washington Strike Group. Chinese PLA Navy vessels shadowed her through the South China Sea. In November 2025, the UK Carrier Strike Group was formally declared at full operational capability. Prince of Wales arrived home in Portsmouth on November 30th, 2025, to cannon salutes and thousands of spectators on the harbor walls. She is now on 5-day deployment notice in response to the ongoing Middle East situation. That is the good news version of the story. The version the Royal Navy wants you to remember. It is real, and it is partial. Because during that same period, HMS Queen Elizabeth was in Rosyth for a 7-month dry dock refit. Both propeller shafts were replaced. 284 hull valves were changed. Rudder blades were cleaned, sea inlet pipes inspected, anti-fouling paint renewed. The entire point of having 2 carriers was to ensure one was always available. For most of 2025, one was in the Pacific and the other was on blocks in Scotland. Independent analysts have started asking questions that were unthinkable 5 years ago. Lord David Richards, the former chief of the Defence Staff, once described the carriers as unaffordable, vulnerable metal cans. There is now open speculation in UK defence journals about whether one of the 2 ships should be mothballed entirely to free up escorts and budget for the rest of the Navy. The harder question sits underneath all of this. In war games against peer adversaries, both Queen Elizabeth-class carriers are reportedly among the first ships lost. Long-range hypersonic missiles, drone swarms launched from outside the carrier's strike envelope, and a thin escort screen make them high-value targets in any modern conflict. One senior assessment summarized by analysts in Whitehall concluded the ships were too valuable to lose, too costly to build, and most damagingly, too vulnerable to use. So the picture Britain is left with is not a simple story of procurement failure. Queen Elizabeth and Prince of Wales work when they work. Operation High Mast proved that they can project power across half the planet. But they remain dependent on propulsion systems that have failed twice in 18 months, on a jet fleet that is half the size it needs to be, on escorts the Royal Navy cannot spare, and on a political class that cannot afford to admit that £6.2 billion of shipbuilding may have bought Britain 2 very large ceremonial objects. When HMS Queen Elizabeth was commissioned in 2017, she was meant to be the symbol of a Britain stepping back onto the world stage after 2 decades of carrier absence. 8 years later, the ship is back in dry dock after her shafts were replaced. Her sister is recovering from an 8-month deployment that exposed how hard it is to keep even one of them at sea, and the repair bill has crossed £1 billion. Britain's carrier story isn't unique. The US Navy is paying to fix a Ford-class carrier that can't reliably launch its own jets. France is stretched thin around the Charles de Gaulle. Every major power is discovering that in the age of hypersonic missiles and drone warfare, the aircraft carrier is the most expensive piece of naval prestige ever invented and possibly the most obsolete. Whether the Royal Navy's £6.2 billion gamble was worth it is a question the next 20 years at sea will answer. If the ships can stay at sea long enough to find out. If this breakdown was useful, subscribe for more stories on how nations spend billions on capability they cannot always deliver. New analysis every week.